my long-term grey watch is still the Romain Gaultier Insight Micro Rotor. I was fortunate enough to see this masterpiece of design and horology created in a factory in Switzerland. I'm still a long way off saving up, so in the meantime I want to investigate more options and share these discoveries with you in a series of mini reviews exploring the extensive watchbox inventory. No matter if we can afford these watches or not, let's have some fun and learn about the haute horology pieces of watch enthusiasts' wildest dreams. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. No wristwatch check necessary because I am indeed wearing a Patek Nautilus that I'll be reviewing for this video. I've had it for almost a week now, and I have to say it has changed my perception. I've got to be honest, it is not a watch that immediately grabbed me. I'm more inclined towards the Royal Oak, as you know, but of course, when you experience a watch, your perceptions change, and it's been really interesting learning about this piece. So without further ado, let's change perspectives and find out a little bit more about this stunning Nautilus. Today we are looking at the stainless steel Patek Nautilus reference 5726. Now before we get into the specifics of the watch, a little bit of context. Following the success of the Royal Oak by Swiss super luxury watchmaker and rival Audemars Piguet, Patek wanted to get in on the action. It was only natural, after all, Patek is one of the top watchmakers in the world. The Royal Oak was crucially important and changed the watch world as we know it by being the first haute horology luxury watch in stainless steel. And so Patek hired the Royal Oak genius watch designer Gerald Genta to work some of his magic, and the result is another icon that has endured for almost half a century. Patek Philippe introduced the first Nautilus in 1976, and it was at an even higher price point compared to the AP. The ads for the first model, the reference 3700, played on this idea, showing the watch usually with the tagline, "One of the world's costliest watches is made of steel." Once again, Genta returned to the nautical theme, but unlike the Royal Oak, it was not British battleships this time, but rather classic French science fiction. As the name suggests, the Nautilus takes direct inspiration from the submarine featured in Jules Verne's acclaimed novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This dictated the porthole nautical look and has given the watch a timeless and distinctive sci-fi cutting-edge aesthetic. Something else we should mention is a year after the release of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, there followed an illustrated version, like a deluxe edition, because it was so successful, and this was in 1871, and it contained 111 illustrations. So there was a gold mine of images. You can actually see them online. They're really beautiful. Of course, there's the Walt Disney film, various illustrated versions. So there's a lot more material there that Genta pulled from, and I think you really feel it in the watch. Genta presented the original sketches to Patek 2 years previous to its release in 1974. This highlights an important point. Its design was somewhat more involved and arguably more carefully considered by both him and the brand compared to the Royal Oak from AP. You can see how it's more subtle in its very unique and very slightly octagonal bezel you see there. The edges and shapes are less harsh and smoother compared to the Royal Oak. Dare I say, more refined even. This played well with the watch being positioned at a higher price, and so finally a new heir to the super luxury steel watch throne came to be. And it was daring at the time too, especially when you consider The diameter of the first Nautilus was 42 millimeters, way ahead of its time in terms of size trends. It was 3 millimeters larger than the Royal Oak even. But thankfully, the one we're looking at today is a little bit smaller. But let's not forget, Patek Philippe is widely considered to be one of the most prestigious watch manufacturers in the world. It built its legacy on more traditional, classical and highly complex watchmaking since its founding in 1839. But if AP could embrace a more modern approach and succeed, why not Patek? To further ensure its superiority over the AP, the movement and dial were both taken out of the case via the front. This construction enabled it to achieve a water resistance of 120 meters, which, at the time, was especially high for a haute horology watch. This high water resistance is still maintained to this day thanks to the modular case design. This versatility undoubtedly gave it very much a big advantage. Patek also capitalized on this in their advertising as well, showing the watch in a whole host of situations. The case design was updated in 2006, and fast forward to 2012, we have this watch which we're looking at today. What I really like about this particular reference, the inclusion of the moon phase also marriages the idea of a dress watch, a more traditional dress watch, with the modernity of the design, a little bit more than your conventional Nautilus. In doing so, it's even more of a do-it-all watch because, yeah, you can wear it suited and booted and just as much in a tracksuit. Unlike the very first Nautilus, the diameter here, and I must stress it's from the 10 to the 4, not including the wing or the ear structure there, it's 40.5 millimeters. With an extremely elegant height of only 11.6 millimeters. This is incredibly impressive considering with all the complication it packs in and being an automatic, having to have the rotor as well. It therefore wears more like a dress watch rather than the sports watch it actually is. However, the integrated bracelet, which is 51 millimeters lug to lug at the widest point, which is actually not at the tips of the lug, but rather that central polished link there. Along with a reassuring weight of about 155 grams. This makes it feel more bold and masculine once on the wrist. If we look at all the finishing, we see that instantly recognizable contrast of satin finished surfaces and then mirror polished sections that are just done to absolute perfection. It has to be said, spending years handling and wearing Royal Oaks, this has much more of a refined and pleasing tactile feel, with hardly any jagged or sharp edges. It's almost as if Genta and Patek wanted to remind you every time you touch it that it's better than its rival, a more highly evolved progression, if you will. The case is rather flat, but thanks to this wonderfully articulated bracelet, it hugs any wrist really, really well, even a petite wrist once properly sized. The flat sapphire glass is almost flush with the generous porthole-inspired bezel, and the smooth beveling here allows for any cuff to slide over it with ease. The portholes on Captain Nemo's submarine were often depicted as having oval shapes, and these soft curves are found throughout the watch. My particular favorite actually has to be the rounded edges of that central high polished link that connects the dramatically tapering bracelet. The bracelet is also relatively thin and very flexible. It's fluid feeling and has a clamshell closure on a double deployant there. There are even tiny ball bearings, you see right there, that securely fasten this. I was quite surprised to learn that it's a pin and collar based link system, which you typically attribute to more affordable watches or more rudimentary kind of earlier bracelets. Now this is very deliberate because of the thinness of each link. It's just, unfortunately, it is the most efficient way of linking it. The links are not that long either. While there are no micro adjustments, removing each link one by one does actually get you a very precise fit. You could always buy it on a strap. And while we're on the subject of straps, I think the watch certainly keeps its distinctive look and identity. And unfortunately, it's being integrated. It's not going to be that immediate strap monster. And if we look at the edge of this magnificent bracelet, you see the hairline beveling, just giving it a little glimmer, flash of light there. These flashes of high polish are continued with the wings or ears. Now these are very important. The one on the right acts as a crown guard, protecting the screw down crown, whereas the one on the left counterbalances it, giving the watch a splendid sense of symmetry as well as securely keeping the watch case together, a bit like the hinge on a submarine hatch. So it's actually functional aside from looking cool and modern. Again, far more involved than the Royal Oak, and arguably perhaps Genta's greatest creation. Like the distant relation from AP, Genta gave the Nautilus its own particular dial that remains another of its important defining features. Unlike the intricate tapisserie dial of the Royal Oak, we see here a more clean horizontal embossing, and in this particular version in a very restrained white silver that borders on some kind of almost metallic ivory white. The indentations of this embossing give it very much three-dimensional aspect and a little bit of an understated shimmer that reinforces the contemporary look. This is then accentuated by contrasting, highly legible, blacked out gold applied markers and baton hands that frame the superluminova. A wonderful but seldom noticed detail is if we see these markers the way they are cut off towards the tips, these corresponding shapes and proportions matching the edge and shape of that octagonal periphery of the dial there. And as you would imagine, in true sports watch functionality, the double marker at 12 assists its orientation in low light excellently. The date is positioned at the 6 o'clock with a classic midnight blue moon phase displayed above it. It is framed by a 24-hour dial, and at the 12 we see towards the center a double aperture showing the month and a day. This is of course an annual calendar requiring adjustment only once a year. These complications can all be adjusted via the hidden micro pushers we see symmetrically placed on both sides of the watch. Now I have to say, most of the time these micro pushers tend to kind of ruin or interrupt the smooth sides of a case, but this time, however, I think they really actually kind of assist that retro sci-fi look. What is important to note about these complications also is the way they are laid out. It maintains the strong lines of symmetry running throughout not only the dial but actually the watch as a whole. And I personally prefer this over the rather messy layout of the 5712, for example. But the pulchritudinous splendor does not end there. If we turn the watch around, we see a display back, again sapphire glass. Unlike the JLC-based super thin calibers of the original, this is a completely in-house marvel of engineering with supremely efficient unidirectional automatic winding. The 21-carat solid yellow gold rotor is mounted on perpetually lasting ceramic ball bearings. It contains a staggering 347 parts, 34 jewels, a free-sprung Gyromax balance with an anti-magnetic Spiromax balance spring. You can manually wind it. It has a 45-hour power reserve and operates at 28,800 vibrations an hour. Naturally, we have all the high-end decoration you'd come to expect: a perlage finished base plate, Côte de Genève striped bridges with hand beveled edges, along with black polished screw heads and chamfered slots. The yellow gold engraving and rotor complement each other as well as the wheels perfectly, and it's all topped off with the Calatrava cross, a hallmark of gallantry and independence. This Capo Lavoro is then tested to 6 positions, achieving the Patek seal standard, an extremely strict rate of accuracy with a tolerance of no more or less than -3 to +2 seconds per day. Perhaps where my biggest negative comes into play is with the movement. Now, while it is an absolute masterpiece, undoubtedly, the lack of hacking is a bit of an annoyance, especially considering its price. In terms of value, the Nautilus has interestingly become one of the most lusted after luxury watches, especially in the last decade. This is somewhat ironic considering when it was first released, it wasn't immediately successful back in the late 70s. These days, however, business moguls, movie stars, sports stars, and musicians, along with so many others, enjoy them immensely. While we are on the subject of its cultural significance, we should really mention a video I saw recently where somebody actually did a kind of survey of luxury watches being mentioned in rap music, and the Patek Nautilus has, for some reason, become the most desired and mentioned watch in the last few years, double that of Rolex, which is really surprising. And I think this is quite an important point because it underlines the fact that even young people are recognizing such a high-end brand in mainstream culture. Don't get me wrong, some might view it as a negative, but actually it's a good thing because it helps maintain its value and desirability. Without the need to rely on flashy bling, it still remains rather understated, but managing simultaneously in making a serious statement. Its value retention is outstanding and is the envy of most brands. This is boosted significantly because it has an extremely strong status symbol allure compared to your more traditional and less modern looking watches. However, it boasts a highly useful complication that we do not typically see in something so sporty. Let's not forget that Patek actually invented the annual calendar watch back in 1996. So even though this amalgamation of complications, especially the moon phase there, harkens back to a more traditional style we commonly associate with the quintessential Patek, it is brought bang up to date with a modernity in its design and definitely continue to endure and be so desired. So, is it my next Grail watch? Well, for me, I have to say, I've really enjoyed wearing it. Obviously, I've enjoyed learning about it. I do appreciate it more. It's certainly opened my eyes to the Nautilus. Personally, I really like the 5711 with the black and blue dial. I'd even go with the original color, which was that kind of Robocop blue. I still prefer the Royal Oak, even though it's kind of brutalist, more cruder, if you will, compared to this more refined creation from Genta. It just appeals to me more. It also fits me better. So in conclusion, it's the perfect execution of quality, bewitching aesthetics, inherent prestige, innovation, iconic power watch status, rugged design that is ready for any situation, the true do-it-all everyday Patek. That is pure class in every sense of the expression. But anyway, there we go. So, yeah, what a week. What a week. Yeah, I'm not really in a hurry to return this one, I have to admit. But yeah, we had to review a Nautilus eventually, right? Let me know your thoughts, queries, comments, opinions, all the rest of it down below. What do you make of the Nautilus? Which is your favorite reference? What other watches from Watchbox would you like me to review? Please do nominate in the comments below. I will catch you in the next one. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. It really does help. And I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.